Your phone buzzes. You open the group chat. Everyone already made plans for Friday. Nobody tagged you. Your stomach drops. Your chest tightens just slightly, in a way you can't quite explain. It's such a small thing. A screen, a few gray text bubbles you weren't part of. So why does it feel like something actually happened to your body? The honest answer has nothing to do with Friday. It's older than language, older than fire, and it's about to make a phrase you've said 100 times without thinking means something far more literal than you ever intended. Here's the first thing to sit with. For most of human history, being cast out of the group wasn't an insult. It was, quite literally, a death sentence. Hold on to that. It sounds like an exaggeration right now. It isn't. A British anthropologist named Robin Dunbar spent years studying something deceptively simple: how big a human social group can get before it starts to fall apart. Dunbar looked at primate brain sizes, at the effort it takes to track who's an ally, who's a rival, who owes who a favor, and who can be trusted with your children while you sleep. From that, he calculated a number that now carries his name: roughly 150. That's the ceiling on how many stable relationships a human brain can meaningfully maintain. The rough size of a hunter-gatherer band, a village, even the guest list at a modern wedding people actually know. That number matters less than what it implies. A hunter-gatherer wasn't just choosing to live in a group because it was pleasant. The group was the only thing standing between that person and the environment. One set of eyes can't watch every direction at once. One pair of hands can't carry enough water, gather enough food, and fight off enough predators to survive a season alone. The band did that collectively, and if you were pushed out of it, you didn't just lose your friends. Dunbar's number also explains something else, something that sounds almost too small to matter until you sit with it. The brain doesn't just track who is in the group, it constantly tracks status inside it. Who is close? Who is drifting? Who might be quietly deciding you're no longer worth the investment? That tracking runs constantly in the background, whether you're aware of it or not. Because in the ancestral environment, the earliest warning sign of exile wasn't a formal announcement, it was small. A missed invitation. A conversation that goes quiet when you walk up. A joke everyone laughs at except you. Long before banishment actually happened, the small social cracks that preceded it were the only warning a person got, and the brain that noticed those cracks earliest had the best odds of repairing the relationship before it was too late. You lost your food, your protection, your warmth at night. Every advantage that separated a human being from a slow, defenseless animal wandering the savannah by itself. So ancient cultures treated banishment accordingly, not as a slap on the wrist, as close to a death sentence as a group could hand down without lifting a weapon. For a long time, when psychologists talked about the pain of being excluded, they treated it as a figure of speech, a metaphor. You'd hear someone say a breakup hurt, or that being left out stung, and researchers assumed this was just language borrowing the vocabulary of the body to describe something that was, underneath it all, a completely separate experience. Emotional pain lived in one drawer. Physical pain lived in another. They might feel similar in conversation, but biologically, most scientists figured they had nothing in common. That explanation held up for decades. It made intuitive sense. A broken arm and a broken heart don't seem like they should be running through the same wiring. A social psychologist named Kipling Williams wanted to test that assumption directly. In the late 1990s, Williams built a simple computer game called Cyberball, where a participant tosses a virtual ball back and forth with two other players. What the participant doesn't know is that the other two players are just a program, and at a certain point in the game, they stop throwing the ball to the participant entirely. No explanation, no insult, the ball simply stops coming. Williams ran this experiment on hundreds of people across dozens of studies, and the results held up again and again. It didn't matter if the participants were told beforehand that the other players weren't real. It didn't matter if they were told the exclusion was completely random and meant nothing personal. Even when every rational reason to feel hurt had been stripped away in advance, the reaction still showed up, fast and involuntary, like a reflex the conscious mind had no say in. People who played this game, knowing full well it was just a simulation with no real social consequences, reported genuine distress, lowered mood, a hit to their sense of belonging and self-worth from being ignored by characters they knew weren't even real. If a fake ball game could trigger that kind of reaction, Williams suspected the exclusion response wasn't really about the specific situation at all. It was about something deeper, something the brain was built to react to almost automatically, regardless of the stakes. That's where the metaphor started to crack. A neuroscientist named Naomi Eisenberger picked up the question and pushed it directly into the brain. In 2003, Eisenberger ran a version of Williams's Cyberball experiment inside an fMRI scanner, watching participants' brain activity in real time as they were quietly frozen out of the virtual game. She was looking for something specific, whether social exclusion would light up emotional processing regions only, the parts of the brain associated with mood and feeling, cleanly separate from anything physical. Before the scan even started, most of Eisenberger's colleagues expected a clean, tidy result. Exclusion would activate regions tied to sadness or frustration, distinct areas from the ones that fire when the body is actually injured. That was the accepted map of the brain at the time. Emotional pain and physical pain kept in separate rooms, related only by the words people happen to borrow from one to describe the other. What she found instead was a region called the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex lighting up, a strip of brain tissue known for exactly one thing up to that point, registering the distress signal of actual, physical tissue-damaging pain. The same region that activates when you burn your hand or twist an ankle, not a nearby region, not a similar one. The same alarm system responding to a game where nobody touched anyone at all. The metaphor wasn't a metaphor. Underneath the language people had been using for centuries without realizing how accurate it was. It hurts to be left out. There was a literal, measurable physical pain signal, firing in real time. So here's the twist. Evolution didn't build two separate systems, one for bodily injury and one for social injury, and have them coincidentally end up feeling similar. It repurposed a single ancient alarm and pointed it at two different threats. Physical injury said, "This body is being damaged, act now." Social exclusion said, "This body is about to lose the group that keeps it alive, act now." Same signal, same urgency, same brain region shouting the same warning, because for nearly all of human evolutionary history, both threats led to exactly the same outcome: death, just on different timelines. One fast, one slow. Think about what that means for the word we've been using casually this entire time: hurt. When you say a comment hurt, or that being excluded hurt, you weren't reaching for a poetic exaggeration borrowed from the language of the body. You were describing with more precision than you realized the exact same neural event that fires when tissue is actually damaged. The metaphor was never a metaphor. It was a direct report from a brain that never learned to distinguish between the two kinds of threat, because for most of its evolutionary history, it never needed to. That's why ancient humans didn't just dislike being excluded, they feared it on par with physical danger, sometimes more than outright violence, because a wound could heal and a predator could be fought off. But exile meant a countdown had started that no amount of strength or courage could stop alone. Anthropologists studying small-scale societies across different continents have found strikingly similar patterns in how banishment was used, saved as one of the most severe punishments available, often reserved for offenses considered too dangerous for any lesser consequence. Not because ancient cultures were unusually cruel, because everyone in them understood, without needing it explained, exactly what a sentence of exile actually meant. And this hasn't switched off just because most of us no longer live in hunter-gatherer bands of 150. Your brain doesn't check your calendar before deciding whether abandonment is life-threatening. It's still running the same ancient software on hardware that hasn't caught up to group chats, read receipts, and unanswered texts. That's why the silent treatment is such an effective, almost cruel form of punishment, even between people who love each other, even when nobody involved could articulate why it feels so unbearable. It's why solitary confinement is classified by many researchers as one of the most psychologically damaging punishments a person can endure, worse in some cases than physical violence, because it targets the exact alarm system evolution built to be inescapable. It's why being left on red can derail your entire afternoon over something you'd struggle to explain to anyone watching from the outside. A meeting you weren't invited to. A photo from a gathering you didn't know was happening. None of these things threaten your food supply or your physical safety in any real sense, and yet the oldest part of your brain doesn't know that. It only knows the pattern it has been tracking since long before written history. Distance from the group, however small, however brief, however easily explained away in daylight, is the first sign of something that once meant the end. Your brain isn't overreacting, it's doing precisely what it evolved to do, treating a small, modern, low-stakes moment of exclusion as if it were the opening seconds of a much older, far more dangerous story. Your phone buzzes again. You open the group chat. Everyone has replied. Nobody tagged you. Only now, you know that ache isn't in your head. It's in the exact same place a broken bone would be, running the same ancient alarm your ancestors needed to survive the only way any of them ever could. Together. Not because they were sentimental about each other, and not because belonging felt nice. Because for nearly the entire span of human existence, standing alone was the single most dangerous place a person could be, and some part of you still remembers that, whether the danger in front of you is a saber-toothed cat or a chat thread that moved on without you.